Oh my god, we're back already. It's been 2 hours since I filmed my last video. But the official court documents from Britney's court date today just came out. Today they were looking into the whereabouts of money that disappeared during the conservatorship and just looking into the financials throughout the 13 years of the conservatorship, just to make sure there was no foul play, which of course, allegedly, there was, and a shit ton of it. My god. If this alleged information is true, Jamie Spears belongs in prison. I'm disgusted. And I actually think from reading this that Britney is the strongest person to ever exist in the world. So instead of rambling, let's just get into it. So there's a whole first page of the document that pretty much just says who's testifying about this issue. So the person testifying was, I'm going to mess up the name, was Shireen Ebadi, who is a former FBI agent who worked for 10 years on complex financial fraud and public corruption cases. Safe to say, she does know what she's talking about on this particular matter. So what I found most interesting, just simply from the beginning of the document, was this executive summary, which reads, and I quote, "At the time that Mr. Spears took on fiduciary responsibilities for the welfare of his daughter, Britney Jean Spears, and her estate, he already had a history of reported violent outbursts, alcohol abuse, and financial mismanagement, which included his own bankruptcy. As set forth herein, this pattern of misconduct continued through the conservatorship to the detriment of Miss Spears and the estate. Mr. Spears used his role as conservator to enrich himself and those close to him or useful to him at the expense of his daughter and the estate, and he often worked to rid Miss Spears' inner circle of individuals willing to support or speak on her behalf. He awarded multi-million-dollar contracts to his friends and to those whom he was indebted, offering them a sizable percentage of his daughter's earnings. He had undisclosed conflicts of interest and engaged in self-dealing with his daughter's assets. He used estate assets to pay personal expenses for himself and his associates, including legal fees incurred after an altercation with Miss Spears' children, leading to a restraining order against him. And he even went so far as to surreptitiously record and capture his daughter's most private communications, including attorney-client communications with her prior court-appointed attorney and private conversations in her bedroom." Private conversations in her bedroom. First of all, where do I even begin? She's 40 years old. Even if this was years ago, she was 30 years old, you're listening to what goes on in your daughter's bedroom? It doesn't take much of an imagination to wonder why I find that disturbing and disgusting. Besides the fact that she's 30 years old and he's listening to conversations in her bedroom, I'm disgusted. He did this all on the heels of serious financial troubles, manifesting in a bankruptcy, while paying himself millions of dollars from his daughter's estate. Literally so gross. It goes on further, just discussing that Jamie had problems with violence and alcohol in the past, but my absolute favorite part of this part of the document is that his daughter, Jamie Lynn Spears, also recounted Mr. Spears' decades-long alcoholism. Her upcoming memoir recounts that he spent most of my life in that cycle of ruinous behavior. His bouts of drinking caused me periods of torment and sorrow. It created a lot of anxiety. The hardest part was, could I trust you? Are you drinking? They used her book against her. That's incredible. They thought that this book was going to save the Spears name. It was going to make everybody think, oh, Britney's crazy. She needed this. No. No. Two can play at that game. If you want to push that narrative, then here you go. Here's the narrative pushed right back in your face. In the next section, they just talk about how Jamie couldn't handle financial responsibilities. He was terrible with his own money. There were a lot of bankruptcies, a lot of failed businesses. The bank wound up seizing land from him at one point to pay off the debts that he owed. And then we get into Lou Taylor's involvement with the money portion of the conservatorship. So it says, as reported by the New York Times on December 19th, 2021, prior to the start of the conservatorship in 2008, Mr. Spears had borrowed $40,000 from TriStar Sports and Entertainment Group, a then obscure business management company with only a few clients owned by Mr. Spears' friend, Lou Taylor. After initially denying it, counsel for Mr. Spears conceded the existence of this loan. Very interesting indeed, because now we start to get a little feel based on that information that allegedly Jamie's counsel conceded to the existence of. Now we start to see why maybe he's okay with Lou Ann Taylor being involved and taking the money from him. It was a little bit of a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of situation, I guess. So now we go on further, read on to point 15. It was against this backdrop that Mr. Spears, after consulting with Lou Taylor, petitioned for the creation of the conservatorship and thereafter installed TriStar as Miss Spears' business manager. Interesting again. We skim a little bit, go on a little further. To be clear, TriStar has nevertheless still failed and refused to answer the simple basic question that Kroll and Miss Spears' counsel have repeatedly asked. How much money did TriStar make from Britney Spears on her estate? Which, again, this is all alleged and this is my opinion. I just need to say that to protect myself. Innocent until proven guilty and all that stuff. But if you have nothing to hide, why aren't you saying it? Why aren't you answering that question? I just think that's really interesting. TriStar has instead referred Kroll, which is the company that the former FBI agent now works for, the private investigator company, and the counsel to 13 years of disjointed and complex accountings, while also providing above-referenced information via its own unverified QuickBooks software, as if you couldn't go in and delete stuff, and that really proves that you're innocent. It's amazing to me. Like, I don't think they were ever expecting anybody to look into it, so they weren't prepared for this moment, but this is already very telling, and guys, we're right at the beginning of the documents. We're at the beginning of, this is the tip of the iceberg. So let's get on to the next page. So the document goes on further, just talking about how Big Jamie is just doing a lot of things that seem really suspicious to them. You know, there's a lot of people going in and out of the business side of his life. It's like a revolving door there, and you start to see a pattern that all of the people that are being fired or that are leaving, being dismissed in some way, don't necessarily seem like they're super loyal to Jamie, or they're against the conservatorship and have been somewhat outspoken to that fact. And then we get into black box security. Guys, I could not even believe my eyes when I read this part of the document. It doesn't even seem real. It seems like a movie. It doesn't even seem like real life. I just want everybody to read this point. Mr. Spears directed black box security to use a variety of surveillance methods to invade the privacy of Britney Spears and others which raise criminal implications for Mr. Spears. Goes on a little further to discuss a former black box employee by the name of Alex Vlasov, and I hope I'm saying that right, who was a whistleblower to the entire operation regarding Britney. A little bit down, the FBI agent says that she spoke to him about his stories and just to interview him, and considers him a very credible source. And I think 25 and 26 specifically are worth reading in its entirety as opposed to me paraphrasing it. So I'm going to read those to you now because they're important. At the outset, it's worth noting that Mr. Vlasov told me it was very clear that Black Box treated Mr. Spears, not his daughter, as its client. Mr. Spears was the person making the decision, giving the directions to Black Box, including, as discussed further below, the directions to surveil his daughter. Mr. Spears was close to Black Box's CEO, Idan Yemeni, even before the establishment of the conservatorship, and was responsible for selecting Black Box to provide security for Miss Spears under the conservatorship. In fact, Mr. Yemeni evidently created Black Box in order to handle Miss Spears' accounts. Guys, there's clearly something shady already going on with that. I think there's a couple important things to note here. Number one, there seems to be a pattern that the people that are directly involved in this conservatorship with Jamie Spears they all seem to be his friends, and they all seem to be benefiting off of this conservatorship. It goes down a little further. It goes on to say that Black Box profited about $6 million through the surveillance that they did during Britney's time in the conservatorship. That's insane. And we already know, allegedly, Lou Taylor profited quite a bit off of this conservatorship as well. So we're starting to see some patterns developing here. And another important thing to note, number 25, that Mr. Spears was making the decisions and giving the directions. In California, there is some law that anything like that, it needs to be a two-part consent. Britney needed to consent for this to happen. I'm sure that she did not, especially with what we're going to read going forward. I'm sure that Britney did not consent to what was going on here. So that's illegal. Okay? That is illegal. Not allowed by law. Unbelievable. And I also forgot to mention that $6 million that was going to Black Box Security, yeah, guess where it was coming from, because it wasn't Jamie. It was Britney's estate. It was $6 million that was billed to Britney's estate. So essentially, she was paying for her own surveillance by her father. How disgusting. Come on, guys, let's read on. Let's read about how Mr. Spears directed Black Box to surreptitiously mirror Miss Spears' phone, because that's legal, right? That's something that you need to know for the conservatorship, right? You need to mirror her phone, right? That's necessary. You need to capture text messages, phone call logs, notes, app activity, phone conversations, all very important stuff for Jamie to know. Very legal, of course, because we're law-abiding citizens here in the Spears house, apparently. But sadly, oh my god, boo-hoo, Jamie, when Britney switched from a BlackBerry to an iPhone, it caused a temporary cessation, and he was very upset because now he couldn't use the same software to see her phone. What was he to do? My God. So you know what they did? Instead of just saying, you know what, maybe it's 2013 now, it's been 5 years probably, of monitoring her phone, because Black Box was already monitoring Miss Spears' phone when Mr. Vlasov began working there in 2012. So I'm just going to assume, again, this is my assumption, this is not fact, that the phone was being monitored since the beginning of the conservatorship, just, as a power move as usual, because that's what we do to our children. So now, instead of saying it's been about 5 years, or 6 years rather, maybe we don't need to monitor her phone anymore. No! They hid an app on her phone. They made an app that was not visible to Britney to continue monitoring everything that she did on her private cell phone. Then around 2015, they got tired of the app not working on her iPhone because of the iOS updates, so they wanted to mirror her iCloud instead on a separate device that they could review at any time. And Mr. Vlasov said that they shouldn't do that because it makes it way more susceptible to intrusion, like hackers and malicious third parties to compromise private information and make it public. And his boss, Mr. Yemeni, did take that into consideration and went to Big Jamie and told him that, and he said that he was willing to take that chance. They then went on to do just that. They got the iPad that linked to Britney's iCloud, and they would continue to look through her stuff. Specifically, Mr. Spears would on occasion ask Black Box to send him specific items from Miss Spears' iCloud, such as therapy notes. Therapy notes. It should be noted that Mr. Spears was aware that he was expressly prohibited from reviewing Miss Spears' therapy notes without her permission following his removal as conservator of the person in 2019. In fact, after Mr. Spears expressed displeasure to counsel for the conservator in April 2019 that he didn't have the power to see her physics records, counsel explained to him that he would need Miss Spears' permission to see the notes on what she discussed with her psychiatrist. Her therapy notes. They want to push this narrative that she's crazy. So don't you think that it would be more beneficial to her if she's truly crazy to not read her private therapy notes that you have no permission to read? And look at the next point. Communication between Miss Spears and her personal court-appointed attorney, Sam Ingram, were among the private communications that Black Box and Mr. Spears monitored. How convenient! How convenient that somebody that is responsible for this conservatorship that he is profiting off of, allegedly, that he's now able to read her private text messages and communications with her attorney. Isn't that so convenient? You see how that works in his favor now, as he's her conservator, fighting to keep her that way. Now he has access to everything that they're going to try and use against him, so he has the upper hand. Very convenient and illegal. Very illegal. And they found out from an email. They found an email from Mr. Yemeni that was forwarded from Sam Ingram once they asked him if he was somehow mirroring Britney's phone. Of course, Big Jamie's attorney came back and said, "Oh no, we're not monitoring Britney's phone. Why would you think that? Absolutely not. We are not doing that." But they were. I said I was only going to talk about the important stuff in this document. This was just supposed to be a breakdown of all the important points. But y'all, there's so much bullshit in these documents. It's unreal. It's like unfathomable to me that this is even, first of all, real life. Second of all, that he got away with this for this long. Him and Lou Taylor, allegedly. again, just trying to cover my bases, but the whole document is just astounding to me with the exception of the end, which I can kind of skim through a little. But I absolutely, I have to read this part. Mr. Spears instructed Black Box to secretly record activity and conversations in Miss Spears' bedroom. I'm going to again reiterate to you, this is a woman who's 40 years old. She was in her 30s the last 10 years, okay. Even her late 20s, this is still disgusting. Because you're telling me her father had access to all of the things that were going on in her bedroom? That's disgusting. That's actually repulsive. I want to vomit at the thought. That is so gross. Vlasov goes on to say that there were digital recording devices taped to the backs of furniture in her room. They had extended battery lives, so they were able to record hundreds of hours of conversations that happened in Britney's bedroom with her boyfriends, with her children, and in one instance with a court investigator, he found tapes from 2016, 2017, 2018 specifically. This is awful. This is so illegal, too. Again, I'm going to bring up the point that in California, surveillance like that is a two-party consent. There is no way Britney consented to this. Absolutely not. So again, I'm going to reiterate that this was illegal. Illegal. This was not allowed. And I think it's really interesting to bring up the fact that Vlasov goes on to say that this was a black box suggestion. They suggested this to Big Jamie, who apparently loved the idea and had them get on it right away because that is just spectacular. Disgusting. And of course, this didn't stop at just Britney. No, Mr. Spears continually surveilled persons of interest in Britney's life. And according to Mr. Vlasov, Mr. Yemeni, again, the boss of Black Box Security, would obtain GPS ping data on individuals of interest to Mr. Spears that would allow him to ascertain those individuals' exact locations. So now he's going even further beyond the scope of his, not even responsibilities, his privileges in this case of the conservatorship, and he's just going and tracking and taking notes and keeping tabs on all of these other people. The document, of course, goes on further to say that is also very illegal, and they used methods that were really only allowed or only even possible from law enforcement. So that's cool. So now we start getting into some more specifics of things that Big Jamie did. It's kind of raising some eyebrows, just financial misconduct, mismanagement of funds during his time as conservator. I'm going to sort of skim over this, but mention specific things. Allegedly, Mr. Spears authorized Lou Taylor's personal legal fees to be paid by Miss Spears' estate, which I think is really interesting because this part of the document goes on further to talk about a lawsuit that Lou Taylor filed against Brian Kuchar, which as far as I know is a YouTuber. What does that have to do with Britney Spears? After that, it says he authorized more than at least $300,000 in excessive or overpayments to TriStar. Again, Lou Taylor pops into the equation. Isn't that so crazy? Why do people think she's involved? 54 is interesting. To date, I have been unable to identify any formal written agreements between TriStar and the estate that spells out TriStar's responsibilities and the commissions and fees that it was to be paid. Based on this and other contextual factors, I believe no such written contract was ever executed. So why are you giving her this money? 56, 2. When Miss Spears took a hiatus from performing in early 2019, TriStar's ability to profit from her estate decreased significantly. On November 12, 2019, Lou Taylor emailed Mr. Spears to say that TriStar's commission only garnered them $179,000 thus far in 2019 because Miss Spears did not perform. Ms. Taylor wanted to ensure TriStar obtained a minimum of $500,000 per year, so she requested a retroactive payment of $308,974.51 for 2019 and an alteration to their agreement going forward so that TriStar would be paid 5% or $500,000 per year, whichever was greater, that Jamie agreed to. Why? Why is he agreeing to keep giving them this money? They're her management. If she's not doing anything, there's nothing for them to manage. So why are they getting 5% or $500,000 a year, whichever was greater? What? What? My God, this part is my favorite. Mr. Spears exploited his role as conservator to promote his own business and pilot television show, Cookin', Cruisin', and Chaos with Jamie Spears, because personally I can't think of a better allocation of Britney's funds than Cookin', Cruisin', and Chaos with Jamie Spears. Absolutely not. Yeah, more like I can't think of a bigger waste of time. I don't know if that ever aired. I didn't even know it was a thing until I read these documents. I hope if it ever aired, no one ever watched it, because who cares? Literally, no one needs that. Not one person in this entire world said, you know what I really want? I really want Jamie Spears to make a cooking show. Nope. This part is without a doubt the most telling to me, and also the most incriminating, if it is true, because again, it is alleged. I have to keep reiterating that. Mr. Spears billed the estate for efforts to oppose the Free Britney movement. I'm going to read this whole part. Mr. Spears also used estate funds to oppose the Free Britney movement, which in recent years supported termination of the conservatorship in the interest of Ms. Spears and arguably against his own best interest in view of his financial remuneration from the conservatorship. When the Free Britney movement gained momentum, Mr. Spears instructed Black Box to conduct investigations into certain members of the movement. Mr. Vlasov argued that this was not a good use of Black Box's time or resources, as the Free Britney fans did not represent a threat to Miss Spears, in contrast to threats from stalkers. Despite Mr. Vlasov's argument, and despite the fact that the Free Britney movement was a reputational or financial threat to Lou Taylor and Mr. Spears, personally, rather than to Miss Spears, who wanted her freedom, Black Box conducted investigations on several individuals associated with the Free Britney movement, a fact that I have independently corroborated based on emails that I have received. I was watching a live stream earlier with Popcorn's Planet and Steph the Ultra Nerd, and Steph made a really good point. So, essentially what he did, he took the money from Britney that she got from her fans, buying her merch and listening to her music. That was how she got that money. He took that money from the fans, took it for himself, and then used it against the fans that gave him the money in the first place. I'm physically scratching my head right now. This makes me so mad. That is so messed up. And again, very incriminating, because why is it such a big deal to you that people want her free? If you had her best interest at heart here, you would want her free eventually also, right? So this is probably the last part of this section that I'm going to mention. The rest of the stuff just has to do with, weird real estate decisions that Jamie was making, and it looks like he was doing some under-the-table stuff with the real estate too, but it's not super important. We get it. He's allegedly funneling money and trying to get as much money and as much profit as he can off of this. What's interesting with those topics that I am going to mention right now while I'm talking about it is that he was doing it through a company that was half owned by Lou Taylor. I got real close to the mic for that one. Just so we're aware of the emphasis that she just keeps popping up where she doesn't belong and is profiting off of it, allegedly. Of course. So here's the last point. Mr. Spears charged Miss Spears' estate for legal fees related to a serious altercation with and harassment of Britney Spears' son. Which, I didn't know this happened, so I guess I was out of the loop for a little myself. But after Jamie was accused of assaulting or abusing his 13-year-old grandson in 2019, he apparently negotiated the scope of a domestic violence restraining order against him. He then charged Britney's estate for legal fees related to this case. She filed a restraining order in regards to her son. Well, not she directly, but this is her son that he was allegedly abusing and assaulting. And you're charging your daughter for that. Despicable. The next point from this section that I want to bring up is just talking about how Jamie charged the estate of Britney for a lot of personal expenses like utility bills and stuff. But I want to bring up these last couple of sentences here in 74. He paid close to $9,000 to Advanced Multimedia Partners for lot improvements, repairs, maintenance, and alarm services for this warehouse that he was renting out for his shitty-ass show. 75. Advanced Multimedia Partners is an entity owned by, drumroll please, I only have one hand, I'm holding an iPad, James P. Watson III, husband of Jamie Lynn Spears and son-in-law to Mr. Spears. What a coinky-dink. So as Jamie is sitting here on all of her podcasts and TV interviews going, oh my God, no, I never knew about the conservatorship. I never took any money from the conservatorship. I never profited off of it. Your husband got $9,000 for these improvements to a warehouse that was paid for by your sister, but it was your dad. And this $9,000 was paid by your dad, but it was really your sister. Isn't that funny? Now, is it possible that she didn't know? Sure. I'm not saying that's not in the realm of possibility. She may have thought that he was just doing jobs for her dad and he was paying her because, you have to remember, it did say that he was getting a lot of money. One, he was getting paid to be her conservator, and two, he was getting portions of the money that Britney was making yearly just because taking care of her and being responsible for her career was now his full-time job. So it's not like he's dirt poor, even without the conservatorship funneling money out of the conservatorship in mind. He was getting paid every year for what he was doing. So it's in the realm of possibility, but do I buy that story? Personally, no. That's pretty much all of the important stuff to pull out of this document. It goes on with some charts with some spending that Jamie did, and also a chart regarding the inequities in the pay that Jamie was getting for doing nothing. But it ends just saying that Britney's civil liberties were infringed and that these people were committing crimes and deserved to be treated as such. And that's pretty much all of the important stuff to pull out of the document. I found this whole thing appalling. I actually found it disgusting. My mouth just was wide open for the entirety of my read because I couldn't believe my eyes. Again, I'm going to reiterate, I know I keep saying it and I sound like a broken record, but you can never be too careful with these people. This is all alleged, and you are innocent until you're proven guilty, and so we don't know that this is definitely the truth. Would I believe it? Absolutely. But is this canon? Not yet, you know? But if it is true, they do belong in jail. All of them, but especially Jamie. Because this is past the point of, oh, he's taking some money from her. No, this is like wide scale. And it's not even just her. They're not even doing this to just her. They're doing this to people in her life. They're listening to her conversations. They're listening to things that are going on in her bedroom. They're reading her text messages. They're going through therapy notes. It's appalling. It's disgusting. It's wrong. And so if it is true, that needs to be handled in a very serious way. While we are on the topic of the law not working particularly in one of the Spears' favors, Alex Cooper, the host of the Call Her Daddy podcast, posted that part 2 with Jamie Lynn is expected to still come out today. Now, it was supposed to come out at midnight like part 1 did the other day, but my guess is that a certain cease and desist from a certain Spears towards a certain other Spears hindered that being posted at midnight. So things needed to be re-edited and reworked, because if that came out and there was any bad talk about Britney, that would have been very bad for Jamie Lynn. That's my guess. Again, that is alleged. But I don't see why else that wouldn't come out at midnight then. So hopefully it does come out. I really honestly hope that they don't cut stuff. I'm sure they did. But the original video that they had posted, teasing part 2, seemed predominantly about Britney. That was pretty much the topic of the entire interview. Britney and her father. So it'll be interesting to see, considering that was their main selling point, if they do edit it, how that is going to play out. And yeah, that's pretty much everything that I have to say, as if this video isn't like 40 minutes. But if you liked my commentary and you like this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe. I'll probably post again at midnight for the third time today, because everybody's got to keep up here. Things are coming out quick. We need to rapid fire, watch it, read it, post it, get it out, spread the word. Obviously, Big Jamie, he's scared of us. He wants to silence us, and that's not going to happen. So we need to make sure that we're getting the word around, that we're being informed, and we're constantly staying updated on what's happening, because that's exactly what he doesn't want. Which is why I'm going to make sure to do it. So I'll see you guys probably in a couple of hours. Peace out.